Hello and welcome to Physio Preachers. Today we will be studying about basics of a spinal cord. So let's begin with this picture. This is brain with brainstem, and the structure below this it is known as spinal cord, which is cylindrical in structure and rests in vertebral canal. Now let's take a slice of spinal cord right here and see what does it look like. So this is what you are expecting to see. This is a cross-section of spinal cord. This central A-shaped structure of the spinal cord, it is known as gray matter, and the peripheral whitish structure surrounding the cross-section of the spinal cord, it is known as white matter. So, what constitutes the gray and white matter? Let me take you to the very basic of neuron. So, this is a typical structure of neuron, in which dendrites are labeled here. This is cell body, this is axon endings, and this is myelin sheath. Now let's take a look what part of the neuron is gray and what part of the neuron is white. As I have already mentioned here, the cell body is gray, the axons are gray, and the axon endings are also gray. Only the white portion is myelin sheath. And what does it constitute to become white? Yes, it is lipids. Back to the figure. As we all know now what part makes the gray matter and what part of the neuron makes the white matter. So we will be able to guess now. Yes, the gray matter is constituted by cell body and non-myelinated neurons, as they do not have myelin sheath. And the white matter constitutes myelin sheath. Let's move on and talk about the landmarks of cross-section of a spinal cord. Let me tell you, this is anterior surface, marking it with A, and this is posterior surface, marking it with P. So, in the posterior surface, there is a longitudinal depression which is known as posterior median fissure. And what about this white posterior part? This is known as posterior white column. And the central A gray structure, there is a posterior gray horn which is narrower, and this is anterior gray horn which is pretty broad. This is central canal through which CSF flows, and this is anterior median sulcus. This is a longitudinal depression or cleft. This is lateral white column, and this is anterior white commissure. We will learn the function of anterior white commissure later in following classes. As we already know, the spinal nerve is a mixed nerve, which means it has a sensory as well as a motor component. What you have to remember is the motor root is always anterior or ventral, while the sensory root is always dorsal or posterior. If we talk about sensory root, we need to know what type of neuron lies there. So there is a bipolar neuron. Bipolar, which means it has two axons with single cell body. When the receptor fires, the previous axon collects this piece of information or impulses and sends it towards the next axon. It delivers this piece of information to the next neuron which is already waiting for it. Some of you might be wondering about dorsal root ganglion. So what is it? Actually, the cell bodies with bipolar neurons collects and it forms the dorsal root ganglion. If you ask about what is difference between ganglion or nucleus, so let me tell you this. This is just a rough diagram of brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord both are component of CNS. And this is cranial nerve, which is a part of PNS or peripheral nervous system. and this is a spinal nerve, which is also a component of PNS. So, if we talk about nucleus, nucleus is any collection of neuron cell bodies anywhere in CNS. That means it is a collection of neuron cell bodies in brain or spinal cord. Yes. And if we talk about ganglion, it is a collection of neuron cell bodies in the PNS. Exactly. Now I will demonstrate about the basic concept how the spinal pathways work. Let's presume you are sitting in the classroom and your cell phone starts vibrating. This vibratory source activates the sensory receptor, which in turn activates the bipolar neuron. The bipolar neuron takes this information and travels through the dorsal root to reach the posterior gray horn of spinal cord, and then they turn towards the white posterior column to reach the brain. This is how some sensory information reach your brain. Then your brain processes this information and you consciously try to attend your call or to shut your phone down. Now the motor impulse from the brain travels through the lateral white column and reaches to the anterior gray horn of spinal cord to relay the information to the another motor neuron. Hereafter, the new motor neuron carries this information and travels through the ventral root to innervate the effector organ. What happens next is the muscles of your upper limb contract and relax in a particular manner to grab your cell phone. Yes, as this is called as effector organ. So, this was just a basic concept of ascending and descending pathways, that how do they work. In our next videos, we will talk about the functions of interneurons and various types of pathways.